It was right there for the taking for the Mets to secure a massive series victory in San Diego against the Padres here. And all it took was Jose Butto stayed in a little too long, a blast, and then Edwin Diaz giving up a walk-off bomb to the man that has been a flair for the dramatic all season long. In my opinion, absolutely a NL Rookie of the Year candidate, and Jackson Merrill walks this ball game off, folks, and sadly the writing felt like it was on the wall as soon as this one was tied up. A beautiful series victory that we all saw happening. It felt like it was happening. Things were going in the Mets' favor. Bad fundies from the Padres continued, grinding into every double play. It felt like imaginable. Jose Quintana gave you 6.1 shutout innings with 0 strikeouts, and this is how you respond. The Mets not executing earlier in this ball game with runners in scoring position, which he had multiple opportunities to pounce with guys either 2 if not bases loaded, and they had nothing to show for it outside of JDM and Mark Vientos' greatness with their centered opposite field power that we have seen. The Mets had nothing for it on the offensive end, and they drop a series that is absolutely inexcusable to drop. Another dramatic loss for the Mets in this one that we're going to live react and break down together. How's it going, all you amazing Mets fans? It's your guy Wardy, and we're back at it with the latest New York Metropolitan postgame segment as the Mets falter in Game 4 of a 4-game set against the San Diego Padres, sadly by a final score of 3-2. This is this is a bet. I'm getting very tongue-tied right now. I apologize, everybody. Let me try one more time because I have a lot to say, and I know I'm going to rant about this quite a bit because I'm not happy with the way that this ball game ended. I know you amazing Mets fans watching this aren't either. Make sure to smash a like and subscribe button as you chime in, folks, for all the latest in Mets land, presented by America's #1 sportsbook, BetUS. Make sure to check them out today by clicking that link down below the description. That way you too get a 125% bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. I appreciate every single one of my live members and reoccurring viewers chiming in live at a replay. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Twitter, spam them in the comments. Let me see in the comments down below to my replay viewers as well, and wherever you get your audio podcasts, as this will be uploaded on Spotify, Google, Apple after the fact, you name it, for our typical Metropolitan post-game coverage, the #1 Mets show not directly affiliated with the Mets. And we have a lot to get into, and sadly a heartbreaking loss for the Mets in this one, a gut-wrenching loss for the Mets, because as we take a look now at the wildcard standings, this is a Mets team that is still 2.5 games out of a spot when the Washington Nationals took care of business against the Atlanta Braves with absolute ease today by a final score of 5-1. Another opportunity where the Braves are quite literally handing you something on a silver platter, and the Mets yet again have nothing to show for it as they are still 2.5 out. Jackson Merrill, who was completely silent this entire series, steps up when he needed to most, and the Mets, while they had great pitching from Jose Quintana in this one, sadly did not have the offensive heroics outside of Vientos and JDM, as I mentioned in this matchup, that ultimately led to the frustrating loss that was this one by a final score of 3-2. I gotta ask everybody on a scale of 1 to 10, what is the frustration level? Because I find myself pretty high in that regard. We're gonna get into a bit on the pitching end, as you guys see here, Quintana, Butto, Maton, and ultimately Diaz, in which we saw the walk-off bomb he gave up, sadly. Hitting-wise, we're gonna get into all the takeaways, just so not a lot going for the Mets on the offensive end. And the Padres, we're doing everything perfect for the Mets when it came to ground ball outs like never before. And we have a lot of really big updates to get into as well in this matchup, everybody, if I didn't emphasize that enough. And not only this 3-2 loss in Game 4 of 4-game set for the Mets, but we have some huge updates to get into on Blackburn, Beatty, McGill, Alvarez, and Chavez, among others. So we will be breaking that down later on in the show here, everybody. But let me know the frustration level, because you want to know where it stems most for me. It doesn't only stem when we saw the Mets sadly not execute with bases loaded situation. Hoeing comes in the ball game, and sadly Lindor struck out there in that bat. I know Brian Hoeing has been absolute nails of a relief option for the San Diego Padres since being acquired from the Marlins along with Tanner Scott. Yeah, Hoeing has been a bigger upgrade there over Scott between the two right now, which is crazy to say. But Hoeing, after striking out Lindor, you could just tell the Mets offense was really laboring. And even when you had Jose Iglesias, Mr. OMG himself, having defensive acrobats like you've never seen before with the great stops that we saw at second base, preventing a runner to get there, the Mets simply did not have what it took to secure this series victory here, and what looked like initially a series victory against the Baltimore Orioles, and taking 3 out of 4 against the Padres before you play arguably the best team in baseball right now, and have been for the past 2 months, and the Arizona Diamondbacks. The Mets are now facing a Diamondbacks team starting to, not tomorrow, but the following day, in which the Diamondbacks have won 6 straight ball games. They have been on an absolute roll, leading the way there in the wild card, and nipping out the heels of the LA Dodgers, the Mets have a tall task still for their next series in this West Coast trip. All the more reason why not securing this series victory hurts as much as it does. And what only stands out, not just the offense that I mentioned, but Jose Butto. I love you, Jose, but he didn't have it today. Butto didn't look overly sharp from the beginning. He got bailed out thanks to some bad funnies and just some tremendous things that went in the Mets' way that we saw there after he came in for Jose Quintana there in that 2-on no-out jam in the 7th. To escape it unscathed the way that he did was masterful. But then we saw Butto after walking the 9-hitter in McCoy. That needs to be the red flag right there. I know Butto has been one of the more reliable relievers for the Mets this season, but I think there are some fair arguments to an extent to say, hey, after Butto walked McCoy, maybe Edwin Diaz should have came in because he was ready then. Mets ended up sitting Edwin down later on this ball game because after Profar, it's the game-tying shot 2-2. You don't need him there for the next inning, in which are you going to utilize Phil Maton then. Edwin comes in, again, at any plus later, this in a non-save situation, and sadly, in a non-save situation, something that Edwin has thrived a lot with this season, was not able to get the job done in this one. Jackson Merrill makes Edwin and the Mets pay. Padres come out victorious. They're still 5.5 up on the Mets in the wild card, and should the Mets have secured a victory and a series victory today, they would have found themselves in the win column of only trailing the Padres by 3.5 games. Things are a lot sweatier there, and it would have been nice to see the Mets nipping on the heels, and not only the Braves, but these other teams more than what they had at this point in the wild card. A lot of frustration, a lot of breakdown in this matchup, everybody, but I want to continue to see your initial reactions and your overall thoughts on this decimating 3-2 walk-off victory for the Padres, and sadly a defeat for the New York Metropolitans here. AJ, thank you so much for the $5 haul. AJ says, so did Quintana talk crap about Butto's girl or something? No, I mean, funny enough, no. Thank you for the donation. I appreciate that, AJ. That did not happen. And even though Jose Butto didn't have his sharpest outing, he's not a guy that I'm going to really rag on a whole lot here. This still feels like it falls on the offense more than anything. Yes, Edwin Diaz giving up a bomb in that situation in general simply should not be happening, but Jackson Merrill has had a flair for that exact dramatic so many times the past month and a half, plus it's not even funny. That's why he is quite literally in the conversation as a NL Rookie of the Year along Paul Skeens this year. If Skeens depends on his inning limit down the stretch of the season for the remainder of the starts that he will have. No less, let's talk briefly here on the offense before we break down the ball game inning by inning, as we always do, everybody. Make sure to smash a like and subscribe button. Greatly appreciate it. Season ending type thing. I don't think that this is a season ender at all for the Mets because truthfully, again, the Mets were right in this series. You know what I mean? It took a walk-off bomb from Jackson Merrill to be the decider. The Mets have went toe-to-toe against the Padres so well this season, and the Mets have also been a team that now has the season series still on the Padres. Why is that important? Should the Mets and the Padres have around the same amount of victories at the season's end for some reason, the Mets have the tiebreaker the same way that they do with the Cardinals. So yes, does it suck to see the Mets lose the way that they did today? Absolutely. This is the opposite of trying to get a rally going into having your biggest series yet there, starting this Tuesday against, yes, that being in the Arizona Diamondbacks, but there are still some takeaways that I think we should make note of in this matchup. But on the offensive end, as I mentioned, that is what stuck out like a sore thumb in this matchup between the Mets and the Padres, because early on, even when Jose Quintana, as I mentioned, gave you 6.1 shutty, what did the Mets offense do with runners in scoring position when they needed to most? They were 0 for 3 and it left 8 on base. So they struggled to put guys in scoring position, and when they were on base to begin with, they simply were not driving them in. It's fitting that the Mets' only 2 runs today were via the long ball, just like kind of what we saw yesterday for the most part, with Lindor leading the way with his 2 home runs. First a grand slam from the left side, then a solo shot from the right side pulled down there. It's been awesome to see the home run hitting in San Diego, but you need more variety outside of that. The Mets did not get that today, and that ultimately led to them faltering in this matchup again by a final score of 3-2. This team is feeble. They're not feeble. I will say, yes, there's frustration. I'm pissed off for sure. I don't know how you can make the rightful argument, in my opinion, to pull Butto out of after walking the 9-hitter there, but this is a greater problem the Mets have had what feels like all season long. They have continuously walked and allowed the 8 and 9 hitters of opposing teams to get on base either via a nonsense bloop single that maybe the pitchers didn't have anything to do about, that they couldn't control, or what they can control, and that is walking the guys. There's zero excuse. You should never be walking the 9-hitter McCoy in this situation. You have the Mets where Jerkson Profar gets an absolute sinker that is right down the pipe. He rips it, and that does it. That's a tied ball game, and right from there, the Mets game was already coming down to an end. They would not rally back in this one. Any possible relief pitchers on waivers? Nothing notable that I've seen as of late, Josh, but there will be before before the month ends for sure, especially the Texas Rangers we're all paying attention to right now. And speaking of waivers, the Pittsburgh Pirates did drop a player that David Stearns wanted big time this past offseason as a fourth outfield option, Michael A. Taylor, who still bags pretty strong and also plays elite defense in center, left, and right. He has been put on waivers there by the Pirates, so that is a guy that the Mets may consider. And if not, don't be shocked if he goes to the Atlanta Braves, because the Braves have continuous injuries. Michael Harris' second went down with injury, sadly, today that we saw. Hopefully he's okay, but injuries continue there in Atlanta. They're looking for any reinforcement right now, and you know the Mets are having a problem when even with the Atlanta Braves, as beat up as they are, still won 9 of their last 12 entering today's game. It got hosed by the Nationals easily by a final score of 5-1. And in that opportunity where the Mets have a true chance to pounce here, they do anything but yet again. That has been the commonality of the story for the Mets since they went from having no expectations this season to now having expectations, climbing out of the 11 games below 500, now in the wild card hunt. We need to see this team win ball games like this, and to see them not do it, man, oh man, does it sting. And I truly believe that is an understatement on my part. I definitely want to know how you guys and gals are feeling. So let's rapid fire break down what transpired in this ball game. There's a lot to make note of on this one, as there always is, everybody. But if you haven't smashed a like and subscribe button already, thank you all so much in advance for exactly that. Help us get to 50 likes and then eventually 100 for a live show goal here on YouTube. If you're watching this on Twitter, X, or wherever you get your audio podcasts, let us know your thoughts about the show and your biggest takeaway from this 3-2 loss in the comments, as you guys and gals always do. But all right, guys, let's continue to break down this ball game, and let's rapid fire it inning by inning, as I mentioned, because this was a ball game for the Mets where, yes, we have some big updates that we'll get into at the end of the show that I will separate from the live stream itself. I will cut it out after the fact and probably post it as a separate video entirely, just because you guys care more about that than to see the Mets lose 3-2 in a walk-off fashion. That is not going to have great shelf life. But what will some of the updates we have here? Prior to getting there, however, let's get into this ball game, because we saw Francisco Lindor lead off said ball game with a single. Then in the bottom of the first, we see Mr. Jerkson Profar get on with an infield single. Xander then with a double play ball ended. So already ground ball, double play balls working in Jose Quintana's arsenal early in this one. Gets out of that jam. As we get to the top of second, JD Martinez with an opposite field single. This is soft tossing southpaw versus soft tossing southpaw. We have Jose Quintana on one bump, and on the other we have Martin Perez. Perez, who is 4-0 with the Padres entering this start, hasn't put up the craziest numbers, and also has given up an opponent batting average of roughly 300 this season. So for these big sluggers from the right side of the plate and JDM and Vientos, it was pivotal for them to pounce on him, and they were able to do exactly that. One man who had horrendous at-bats today, however, was Mr. Pete Alonso, and we'll get into that here in a second. But before we do, JDM with an opposite field single, that snaps his 0-for-11 skid. Then we see Jose Iglesias get on with a fielder's choice. Nothing else transpires, however. We then get to the bottom of the second. Manny Machado hits a leadoff double. Nothing else transpires, however. Quintana works out of that jam. So then we head to the top of the third. Mark Vientos gets on with a 2-out opposite field single. Then we see in the bottom of the third, Quintana works his first 1-2-3 inning of the day. As we advance to the top of the fourth here, JDM rips a 2-out home run. This will be center right. JDM with another bomb of the year. 110 exit velocity on that one. JDM got all that bad boy. Mets take an early 1-0 lead, but sadly would not last in the end. Jose Iglesias gets on with a walk. Terrence gets on with a walk. A great at-bat there by Terrence, I might add. To this point, the Mets batters were grinding down and really working Martin Perez beautifully, having 6, 7, 8, 9 plus pitch at-bats here with every batter it felt. And thankfully, we're able to work Martin Perez out of the ball game as he walked the bases loaded for Harrison Bader as he was that final walk there. Hoeing comes in to face Francisco Lindor, and sadly Lindor strikes out there on a nasty splitty that we saw down and away from Mr. Hoeing. He was beautiful in his 1.1 innings of a shutout ball against the Mets, 4 strikeouts as well. Hoeing has been that sadly that huge thorn in the Mets side among relief options for the Padres throughout the series. I expected it heading in with the way that he's been pitching post trade deadline, and that sadly continued in this matchup here. But as we continue to break down the ball game, AZ, thank you so much for the $10 donation. I would get to that shortly, but before I do, let's continue to break down the ball game here, because the Mets have bases loaded and Lindor sadly strikes out to strand bases loaded. That's important just because the Mets had little opportunity with runners in scoring position in this matchup. And when they did, they were not able to pounce the way that you hoped and expected them to do. As we then get to the bottom of the fourth here, we see with 2 outs, Manny Machado gets a 4-pitch walk. That's all she wrote, though. Manny did not have an RBI, I believe, in this entire series. Maybe he did there in the Mets blowout loss, but, you know, not a lot to show for Manny. Hit a double, hit a single, and also had a long single later in this ballgame because he wasn't hustling out of the box right away. Colored me shocked. Then we see in the top of the fifth, Pete Alonso gets on here with a single. Nimmo has an infield dribbler that he gets on first because it's an infield dribbler down the first baseline. Then the guy throws it on his back. He's not out of the realm of where he's supposed to be running at all. He's fine. Nimmo's safe. 2 on, less than 2 out there for the Mets. Can they pounce? Can they take advantage? No, they do not. Starling Marte and JD Martinez strike out back-to-back to end the inning from there. Jose Quintana with another 1-2-3 inning to work here in the fifth. Still no strikeouts through 5 scoreless innings for the veteran southpaw and Jose. As we get to the bottom of the sixth, this is where frustration starts as well because McCoy, who gets on with a single, he did great against the Mets all series long for a veteran infielder that was caught up just now by the Padres. Then Jose Iglesias, speaking of veteran infielders, a former Padre from a year ago that was really never given an opportunity, takes advantage of the opportunity of a scorching ball coming his way there to second base. He dives out and gets the tag on second base with the toe tap. One toe there, I believe that was his left foot, completely stretched out, laying out there on the dirt. Tremendous play by Jose Iglesias, something you simply are not going to see there at second base on a day-by-day, night-by-night basis whatsoever. Brilliant work there by Mr. OMG to get that huge out, to get McCoy out on the fielder's choice. I believe that, I'm forgetting, I think it was Profile or whoever there that allowed, that got on first on the fielder's choice. Nothing else transpired from there, thankfully, though. Then as we get to the top of the seventh, we see Vientos with his first home run of the day. Marky V with an absolute bomb to right center over 420 feet for the 21 home run hitting third baseman now, and Mark Vientos. One could rightfully say Vientos has been the better slugging third baseman between himself and Manny Machado this season. Can't believe I'm saying that, but that's the actual truth because that is how good Vientos Swaggy V has been all season long. Mets are now up 2-0 in this ball game, and let's get to the point of where everything really starts to crumble for them because it sadly happens very shortly after this. Vientos with his 21st home run of the year, 432 feet to be exact. Mets are up 2-0 in the bottom of the seventh for Manny, who gets that deep single, bounced off the wall hard for Nimmo, gets a nice relay throw there to the cutoff man in time without a problem. Jackson Merrill gets on with a walk. Jose Budo now comes in with 2 on, no out here. Jose Quintana's day is done after 6.1 innings, as I mentioned. A 0 earned run ball. I want to know from each and every one of you on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you grade Jose Quintana's outing going 6.1 shutty, 4 hits, 0 earned runs, 2 walks, 0 strikeouts, a 4.36 ERA for the veteran southpaw. Spamming the live show to my replay viewers down below. Greatly appreciate that. What's your thoughts on a great outing from Jose Quintana and how Mr. Jose Budo works out of this jam is by all means not what you initially expected heading into this sequence. So let's break it down here because Jose Budo comes in with 2 on, no out here that we see in the bottom of seventh. We're seeing the Padres really trying to rally in the seventh inning stretch, rightfully so. And then Budo somehow escapes the jam. One, because we see Peralta have himself just missing doubles down the third baseline and the first baseline. But the final out would be Jackson Merrill tagged. Thankfully for Jackson, who would be the winner in the end. Sadly for the Mets, that would not be so great. But Jackson Merrill would be thrown out before by Luis Torrens to get out at second base. That does it. Lindor's juiced up, pumped up, rightfully so. We're feeling good. We're riding high. We're seeing after this beautiful throw out and tag there by Lindor, you're thinking, okay, the Mets are going to have this game in the bag, right? Budo gets out of that jam unscathed when, you know, he was thrown in the fire, didn't have his best stuff. It didn't matter in the end. Torrens is now thrown out. 10 out of 17 batters that have tried him this season going first to second or second to third. Mostly first to second, though, obviously. Torrens, who got the start over Alvarez, who we will be talking about soon, folks, as Alvarez's struggles have been magnified. And we have a bit to say on Eric Chavez and the Mets' hitting approach with Alvarez. Is it the right one or the wrong one? I think that there are going to be a lot of choice words from Mets fans as we break that down later later in the show as our separate Big Mets update segment here shortly. But before we get into all the latest updates there, let's wrap up this ball game, because as we then get to the bottom of the 8th, Mets do nothing in the top of the 8th. This is where the Padres bullpen is really able to step up. In the bottom of the 8th, we see Tyrone Taylor come in for Charlie Marte. McCoy then gets on with a walk there, and that's where you're walking the number 9 hitter. Jurickson Profar with the 2-run shot. That's where there was some controversy. Edwin Diaz should have been put in the ball game, some were saying. Others were saying that they didn't mind Edwin not being there. And truthfully, if you're asking for my opinion, I know Budo didn't have his best stuff today, but I'd be lying if I said I expected Profar to tie the ball game up there with the home run. I thought it was fine to have Budo face another batter, but maybe that's shame on me, because this is a result-oriented type situation, and the results here prove that you should have brought Edwin Diaz in the game sooner. Now, I understand some rightful counters are, if you bring in Edwin, maybe he still gets lit up the way that Jackson Merrill lit him up an inning or so after the fact. While that may be true, we're never going to know in the end, and that's why I really don't think it matters too much one way or the other regarding Budo. When he should have been pulled, it sucks. It is what it is now. Profar has had a tremendous season for the Padres. Got all that one, and that was just a bad pitch placement by Budo there, who had, mind you, Profar well out on the changeup of pitcher so prior. Why are we throwing the sink back in there? I didn't understand that at all, nor did other people that I was seeing across social media having their choice words about the Mets faltering in the sequence as well. And I don't blame you guys at all for feeling the way that you do. The frustration levels are high, because this is not only a vital series for the Mets, this entire road trip is, but to allow a series victory, a 4-game series victory, to slip away in this fashion to this magnitude, holy guacamole, is this a gut punch? It sucks. It really does, guys. I can't hold back. It's just the truth. We just have to shake it off and move on now to Tuesday for the next game, and we'll see how that goes against the red-hot Diamondbacks. It's either going to go great or it's going to go terrible. There will be no in between. As we continue to break this down, we see Xander get on then with an infield single. A great attempt there by Lindor. Then Phil Maton comes in to relieve Jose Budo, and he escapes the jam as Manny would come in with 1 on, 2 out, and Manny would have himself an out there. I believe a ground out to end the inning. As we get to the top of the 9th, Luis Torrens is pulled out of the ballgame for Jesse Winker as a pinch hitter. Winker first pitch swinging, grounds out, and then we see the Mets go down order from there. Lindor strikes out on 3 pitches, and in his defense, when you have a Suarez throwing 100 consistently at you, it's not an easy thing to handle late in the ball game. He was not able to handle it there. He was overpowered, and that's where the Padres, who have arguably the best bullpen on paper in all Major League Baseball, were really able to step up and utilize their flamethrowers that we saw in the 8th and the 9th inning. Because then as we got to the bottom of the 9th, Edwin Diaz works himself at least 1 out, and then Jackson Merrill calls it a ball game, rips a home run to right. That does it. Mets lose this one by a final score of 3-2. And as I alluded to already, everybody, Mets still 2.5 games out of a wild card spot. That's why this team's so much more. They could have gained a full game with the Braves faltering the Washington Nationals. And why this team's even more, and why every game is more magnified, and why us Mets fans are really getting stressed fast when viewing the wild card race at the moment, is the Atlanta Braves. I understand they have a lot of ailments, and I understand that no game is guaranteed no matter who you're playing. Their latest game against the Nationals is a great example of exactly that. However, the Atlanta Braves do have one of, if not the easiest strength of schedule on paper for the remainder of the season. No, I'm sadly not exaggerating as I say that, everybody. And yes, this is why it comes down to the Mets controlling their destiny more than anyone else. But as we take a look at the Braves schedule for the remainder month, you have the Minnesota Twins for 3, the Phillies for 4. Then as we really get into September, 3 Rockies, 3 Toronto Blue Jays, 1 against the Reds in an anomaly game, 2 against DC, 4 against the Dodgers, 3 against the Reds, 3 against Miami, 3 against our Mets, and 3 against the Royals. Yeah, I understand how that is easily one of the best schedules on paper for the final month of the season. Will the Braves be able to pounce enough for all their ailments to get in that wild card spot to potentially be bounced right away? Or can the Mets continue to grind away and hopefully secure a series dub against the red-hot Diamondbacks? We will soon find out, everybody. But to everyone frustrated, everyone thinking that this is a gut punch, and this is a potential start of the nail in the coffin, I don't blame the reactions to a degree, but to suggest that the Mets are cooked here or anything like that is far from it. They're showing you how close this race is right now, because just one win or loss here in this situation separated the Mets and the Padres by a whopping 2 games. Because once more, the Mets won this, Mets are 3.5 behind the Padres. If the Padres won it, which they did, they're now up 5.5. I know the Mets aren't necessarily chasing the Padres right now, but they're chasing a wild card spot. When you're facing these wild card contending teams, you got to get the job done. I was very impressed impressed with the Mets throughout the bulk of the series on their ability to really pounce on Padres pitching. That we saw against both Cease and Kane yesterday, which was great, but there wasn't enough variety from these Mets hitters that we saw in part, not executing enough outside of Francisco Lindor, and it stings knowing that this was a series that truthfully, one pitch here very well was the difference, and honestly, when I look at how the two teams played, I liked more from what I saw of the Mets than I did versus the Padres between the two. I wasn't overwhelmed by the Padres and what they offered. I was overwhelmed by the relief pitching, if anything, and Joe Musgrove carving us up, but that's an anomaly of a pitcher outside of all the other options they've had. The Mets have handled just fine. This one stings because this was not a series where you felt like the Padres absolutely took care of business against the Mets. They just came out victorious in this one the same way that they have in many situations this season, and that has to be tip of the cap. That has to be credited. But having said that, I think it's also still important to make a note of some positives that we took from this 4-game set, why us Mets fans cannot hang our heads too low. We just have to go bounce back right away the same way hopefully the Mets can bounce back here. To anyone thinking that the season is done, I got a bridge to sell you, because once the season is officially done, we will get there, because no one would have been saying that the Mets won today. I know every game's vital. I know we only got like 30 left, so they're very important, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to break down and get into here. AZ with the $10 house says, Budo and Diaz broke my heart today. The offense faltered with runners in scoring position. Mind you, they didn't have many opportunities. The bigger problem was not pouncing with guys on base in general. Many should have took Budo out after the walk. Jackson Merrill's a stud. Got to sweep the Chicago White Sox. Keep the faith, LGM. I agree. You got to sweep the White Sox when we get there. The White Sox just hit the 100 loss plateau tonight, I believe, too, which is very unfortunate for them. Wardy, I feel it's insane to keep expecting these guys to suddenly become something they haven't been in 2 months. They haven't been for 2 months. They haven't won 3 games in a row in a month. Let's just enjoy a winning record. Of course, we have to enjoy a winning record, but now with every game so vital in this wildcard race, it's really hard to do exactly that. I know there are some Mets fans out there that can enjoy the ride for what it is right now, knowing the expectations heading into the season, being down 11 games below 500, not expecting them to be anywhere where they currently are. While that might be true, what is also true is a lot of fans have been grinding it out every single day with their fandom, like the Mets have themselves and their performance, and we want to see this team crack postseason play desperately, because it'll just be so fun. It'll be great for young players' development. It'll be great for the Mets to hopefully continue their winning ways as a team, pushing for playoffs and being in playoffs more often than not every year for a number of years now. Joseph with the $5 high, I greatly appreciate that. Petition have Gary, Keith, and Ron to stop mentioning the opposition's home run numbers and when they're at bat. 100%. Gary does a great job jinxing, and he knows it. He does it all the time. Thank you for the donation, though, Joseph. Greatly appreciate that in the chat, my man. D-Mac with a $5 high. Let's go up to D-Mac here in a second. And we got some more comments I'm going to get into in a minute, everybody. Thank you so much. D-Mac with a $5 hall says, we were pretty evenly matched, eventually edged out by a better bullpen. Herpa not surprised. Herpa not surprised either. This was a Mets game where they were teetering the entire time. They had no business being up just by 1 or 2 runs with Jose Quintana on the mound, yet it was happening somehow. And because of that reason, we were all getting this fool's gold thinking, okay, the Mets are going to secure the series W. They're going to get it done, and sadly it falters and it blows up right in front of our face. D-Mac, thank you for the donation. I appreciate that. Shout out all my live members watching live on a replay here on YouTube, and my subscribers if you're first chiming in. Make sure to smash that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Greatly appreciate that as we break down the latest in Mets land as they falter in a dramatic walk-off fashion to Jackson Merrill and the Padres in Game 4 of a 4-game set by a final score of 3, 3-2 here. AZ with a $5 haul says, my bad, I messed up on my previous super chat. Mets got to stem the tide against the D-backs and sweep the Chicago White Sox. Keep the faith. You didn't need to donate again, AZ, when you had an error, but I greatly appreciate you doing that, so thank you so much for that, my man, and I agree with you 100%. I do believe the Mets are going to step up a little bit more than you might think against the Arizona Diamondbacks. The reason why I say that is the Mets have had an act for kind of showing up against some higher competition even when they have been rolling. Now, could they face the Diamondbacks the same way that they face the Astros and still get worked and lose that series? Because the Astros, when they finally started to get hot this year, faced the Mets right as the Mets were starting to get hot, and the Astros bested the Mets between the two at the time. Now, fast forward a month plus later, we have the Mets versus a D-backs team that simply hasn't lost like at all it's felt for the past month plus. We'll see how they match up, but all I'll say is I did not expect the Mets to have this series against the Padres, to have the comfortability that they did in 2 out of the 4 games and 3 out of the 4 right in the thick of it and trying to win the ball game. So because of that reason, I still find myself having a level of confidence in this Mets team. Call me crazy, label me whatever you want, but I was not disheartened by the Mets' overall performance in the series. I was taken back by the loss today, and the series loss, yes, absolutely, but I'm not taken back on their ability to still grind things out and be right in the thick of things going forward. I think that potential is still very much there, and for good reason. Today was sadly not their day, and it ended in a dramatic fashion, which is always amplified when that ends a series on the note the way that it did. Zach Flakerton with the $5 hog. Thank you so much, Zach. Zach says, the Mets have proven anything this season. It's that the strength of schedule means jack. We're still in it. Anyone who thinks we're not shouldn't want 100%. This is the same Mets team that, again, has looked better in their series against the Padres and the Orioles than they did against the Oakland Athletics and against the Miami Marlins earlier this season, right? So it's all about the ebbs and flows of the 162, riding high when things are going right, and making sure that you don't stoop too low like they did earlier this year, free falling to 11 games below 500. Avoid those gaping holes that we have seen of really falling downward, and make sure that you're just climbing upward more often than not. For the Mets, 2 out of 3 against the Orioles is great. 2 out of 2 against the Padres is fine. It just stings 10 times more knowing that they had a victory in their grasp basically up until the end in this one. And that is why baseball is such a love-hate relationship for each and every one of us. But if there's also another thing to make a note of with the Mets here, so you take 2 wins out of the Baltimore Orioles, you take 2 wins out of the Padres. So the Mets throughout this stretch right now are 4-3 throughout those 7 games. They have a 3-game set against the Diamondbacks, and they got another 3, I believe, against the White Sox. And the Mets can come out of their next 6 games and to cap off their road trip above 500. Yes, would I like them to be more than that 100%, but the Mets can muster still an above 500 road trip that could still have them right in the thick of where they want to be, especially knowing the Braves have some big series coming up, a 4-game set against the Phillies to end August, heading into September. That could really bode the Mets well, as that will be in Philly as well. That's a batter's box. Phillies finally starting to turn things on a little bit. I'm hoping that is a bloodbath of a series where the Mets can hopefully pounce should the Phillies finally get in a groove this season, in which they have been anything but what's felt like the past 1.5 to 2 months now. Let's see. They'll be 4-6 after Arizona. Wouldn't shock me at all. My prediction heading into that 10-game stretch was 5-5. I'm hoping that they prove me wrong and they go above 500, but I also will not be shocked at all, because this is so fickle when it comes to the wild card race, and everything snip snap and how much things can change in such a short period of time. So the same way that we react to big victories is the same way that I need to react to a very unfortunate, yes, vital loss for sure, but I need to be level-headed with this, because that's how the Mets need to be too. I'm trying to channel my inner MLB player, my inner New York Metropolitan. I want them to be calm, cool, and composed, and to just respond the best way possible. That's all we can ask right now. All things Mets talk in the chat says, boom, Mets. That's hilarious. I appreciate you chopping in no less. Love my Mets to death. I don't care if we make playoffs or not. I mean, I certainly care if we make playoffs or not, but is my love for them going to waver one way or the other? No. Of course it isn't. And we got roughly 1,400 live viewers in here between YouTube and Twitter. Thank you all so much, each and every one of you. Continue to smash those buttons as we break down the latest in Mets land, as they sadly falter in a walk-off fashion by a final score of 3-2 in this one. Give me 1 second, everybody. I'm going to get to some donations. Then we're going to break down more here in this matchup in just a second. Give me 1 moment, everybody. And again, I appreciate you all taking the time. Benjamin Walters with the $5 holla. Season will come down to second last series in Atlanta. It very well could. And in a very fitting fashion, it would be reminiscent of it being like 2022, where the Mets got either swept or lost 2 out of 3. Fingers crossed and knock on wood that doesn't happen, but we all know the Braves are going to be juiced up to play the Mets down the stretch, and what's going to be a vital series at the time for both teams, I'm sure. And we all know the Braves, if there's one thing that can get them going, even with everyone hurt and their mother, is playing the New York Mets. Damn, just damn, says 1200. Thank you for the donation. You know 1200 is heartbroken when he can't even make a reference about our over 2+ year joke having to do with the best southpaw Major League Baseball, said absolutely nobody other than 1200 myself, Thomas Zapucki. I love you, my man. And again, it sucks to see. It really does. Is Ozuna out? Ozuna will be ready for tomorrow's game. I believe he had a sore knee after today's matchup, but he'll be fine. Michael Harris, I don't know the status on. That is one that we'll find out more on in the second, over the next day or so. You can see I don't believe, but I'm just trusting my eyes. I understand that, KC, and I don't blame fans for trusting their eyes. They want to have a further reason to be swayed beyond what they're witnessing right now with the Mets not playing consistent baseball. And at the point that was brought up earlier in the show, I think it's very important, is the following. The Mets having not having like 3 consecutive wins all in the month of August is telling of their lack of consistency that they have had, especially still post All-Star break. Post-trade deadline, post-All-Star break have not been in the Mets' favor in a lot of regard, on the consistency front at least. When's the next game in attendance? We'll be at Red Sox game September 3rd, $5 Tuesday. Awesome, Emerson. I don't know when the next game I will be attending yet will be. I initially was planning to hit another game or two here in August, but I'm going to be out of town probably for the next week or so now. So the earliest I'll be back at Citi Field will be sometime in early September. So I will definitely keep you guys informed next game that I plan on hitting so we can chop it up and break it all down together. But wow, thank you guys for the endless support of all my live viewers on Twitter as well. I appreciate you a lot. If you could hit that like, that follow button, and that retweet button, that'd be greatly appreciated. And make sure you hop over to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. That way you can check out our video format along with subscribing, so that way you can interact with our amazing live viewers that we have here watching live on YouTube right now. You guys are all the absolute best. So as we continue to break down this ball game, everybody, there's a couple things I want to highlight both on the pitching and on the offensive end, and then we're going to get into the big Mets updates to wrap up the live show. But before we get out of here, let's take a quick word from our amazing sponsor on the channel, one you know very well, that being, yes, America's #1 sportsbook at BetUS.
BetUS, America's favorite sportsbook and casino. Live betting and racebook. We're celebrating 30 years with a historic offer. A 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits. Plus 10% gambler's insurance. Get started today. BetUS, where the game begins.
Okay, so we got Chalk Bunt saying early September. Good. We'll be out of contention by that. Chalk, you come back to me once we're in the first week of September, and we'll have that discussion if that is in fact true or not. I'm inclined to believe that will not be the case. I think the Mets are going to be in this wildcard race until the very end. Even if they get absolutely rocked against the D-backs and find themselves 4.5 out of a wildcard spot, I do think the Mets are still going to climb up until their final game of the season, barring current changes. Andres with the $2 haul. Thank you so much. Andres says, got to catch up versus the Chicago White Sox and hope Braves lose to Phillies. 100%. I mean, it's as simple as that, my guy. So let's continue to get into a little bit more here, as I would like to make note of Jose Quintana and what worked so well for him today. Mind you, Jose Quintana, everybody, is the first Mets pitcher since Ed Lynch, I believe, back in 1984. Don't quote me, because I believe that's what Gary, Keith, and Ron said on the broadcast, but I could be wrong. Since 1984, when Ed Lynch was on the bump, is the last time the Mets have had a starter go 6+ innings of shutout baseball without recording a strikeout. Insane stuff, because I was saying myself throughout the entire start, when was the last time I witnessed a Mets starter put up a line like this? And I couldn't think of one, because it's true. They simply haven't done it in my lifetime as a fan. That's how long it's been. Jose Quintana was absolutely masterful working his ground ball outs tonight. We saw him work a whopping 13 ground ball outs in this matchup. He had the sinker working beautifully. Everything in his arsenal was going exactly what you'd expect against a Padres lineup that leads all the National League, not only in hits, but also in double plays and ground ball outs. They put the ball in play a lot, but it also leads to their demise. And for the Mets and for Jose Quintana, they had a perfect game plan, and they properly pounced on said game plan. And for those reasons, I am going to give Jose Quintana a yes. You're going to hear this. It's crazy. It's something I rarely do for guys that don't even give us 7-inning outings, but I'm going 7 out of 10 at least for Jose Quintana. I'm actually going 7.5 here for Jose. I thought he was brilliant against this Padres team. This is exactly how you need to approach them, knowing that he's a soft tossing southpaw that needs his pinpoint accuracy. I cannot emphasize enough how brilliant Jose Quintana was in this start. Further reason as to why the Mets losing this game stings all that much more, knowing you got a quality start from a guy that's posted an 8+ ERA in his previous 4 starts here in the month of August. Not ideal, certainly not ideal to drop a ball game where you had it in your grasp with Jose Quintana. Yes, Jose Quintana leading the way in that regard. So that's what I got to say there on the pitching. Edwin Diaz, it is what it is. Jackson Merrill has been fantastic and has done this so many times. Past number of months, it doesn't matter who he's facing. So I'm not going to hang that much on Edwin. Obviously, would have loved to have that pitch back, but I think that was just a very good at-bat for Jackson Merrill, more than anything that bested Edwin Diaz in that situation, and just stings all that much more knowing the circumstance there. A tied ball game, another non-leveraged situation, non-save situation that you had to throw Edwin Diaz in. Hopefully the Mets don't need to find themselves doing that much more this season, because mind you, the Mets have only had right around one true save opportunity in the entire month of August. This is the same Mets team that recorded around 11 saves a month ago. What has changed so much has been, as we noted earlier in the show, the lack of consistent winning and the lack of proper structure with this bullpen has all led to the demise for this Mets team. So we're going to get into more on that bullpen here shortly, as we have some updates with Huascar Brosman been funny enough, and others that we'll get into here shortly. But on the offensive end, to briefly rapid fire what did not stand out in this matchup, Francisco Lindor 1 for 5 there, continue his MVP campaign. Not a great day today, but it wasn't a great day for most Mets hitters outside of JDM and Vientos. Lindor flashed the leather beautifully as he always does, and still leads the way among all players in the National League, even over Shohei Ohtani. A 40-40 season is impressive, but what's more impressive is having a north of a 7 F4 right now from offense and defense leading the charge in that shortstop position. Lindor 1 for 5 with a 269 average at 826 OPS on the year. Mark Vientos 2 for 4 that we saw there with an RBI, and thanks to his home run. Vientos with a couple hits today, a 277 average at 885 OPS for, in my opinion, the best slugging third baseman in all the National League right now. One of the best in baseball outside of Rafi Devers. Pete Alonso 1 for 4. Bad day at the plate for Alonso. Do not let that line deceive you. He did not have much to show for it whatsoever. 245 average, 799 OPS, and his strikeout, mind you, came out, or his out was after being up 3-0 in the count like he did a couple days ago. I just don't know how Alonso manages to do that and get worked after just being a pitch away from a walk. 3-0 to begin your count is nuts. Brandon Nimmo 1 for 4 in this one, a 226 average, a 745 OPS. Sterling Marte 0 for 4, 274 average and a 728 OPS. Tyrone Taylor 241 average, 682 OPS. JD Martinez 2 for 4 with his opposite field home run, a 251 average, a 774 OPS. Jose Iglesias 0 for 3, a 325 average, at 843 OPS. Luis Torrens 0 for 2, but did throw out a batter in Jackson Merrill. Sadly, he wasn't able to throw him out there from that home run that we saw to walk off this matchup in the ninth, at 258 average, a 739 OPS. Jesse Winker 0 for 1, first pitch swinging ground ball out there that we saw as a pinch hitter in the ninth, at 262 average, a 781 OPS. Francisco Alvarez, who did not get in at bat either, a 236 average, a 683 OPS, and Harrison Bader 0 for 3, a 252 average, a 684 OPS. Bader, outside of his tater bomb that we saw yesterday, taking that monkey off his back to snap his 0 for 20 skid, has still been laboring with the bat for the most part throughout the past couple weeks now, and hopefully that changes sooner than later too, because we don't got much baseball left to be had this season, folks. Right now, the Mets aren't in a playoff spot. As much as that saddens me to say, look at it with me. They're not there, and because the Mets aren't there is exactly why I think there's not only a lack of interest among Mets fans with post-game coverage consistently right now, because the Mets haven't been consistent, and two, this is a Mets team that until they find themselves in playoff discussion, fans simply are going to count them out more often than not. A lot of them have this season. There's been a lot of optimism too, but I've seen full-fledged both sides of the coin when evaluating the Mets this season from both the positive and the negative fan point of view. Plenty this season. So as we get into this one, everybody, what I'm going to leave you with is the following things here. We have some key updates I want to share with each and every one of you that have everything to do with the Mets on their latest with Paul Blackburn, along with Huascar Brazoban and many others. So before we get into breaking down all the key details on exactly that, all I ask from each and every one of you, to my roughly 1,500 concurrent viewers, is make sure you guys continue to smash the like and subscribe button here on YouTube. Thank you so much. To all my replay viewers, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. To all my live viewers and my audio listeners, you will probably hear things continue. You might just have a pause. If I pause and cut things off, that's because I posted it as a separate segment entirely on the channel. If not, then you're going to hear the entire audio format that's going to continue to roll in a second. But on my replay viewers, let me know your initial reactions to the 3-2 walk-off fashion loss for the Mets in Game 4 of a 4-game set by a final score 3-2, as I mentioned down below. And shout out BetUS, as always, for being America's #1 sportsbook. Make sure to check them out today by clicking that link down below in the YouTube live description. That way you too get a 125% bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. We got some massive big updates to get into regarding the Amazons here. Let's get into exactly that. And my replay viewers, this is where I'll be cutting things off. And for my live viewers, this is where we're going to continue on with the show.